My name is Bethany Rachel and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm a pet portrait artist and I draw your fur babies for a living. I love my job and today I want to introduce you to this beautiful pair. This is Martha and River, and last year was their first time competing together at CRUFT'S. This year they stepped into the main ring, achieving an incredible third place in the Novice Cup, as well as already qualifying for 2027. Insane. Martha has followed me from the very beginning of my art journey over on TikTok, and when I reached 1,000 followers, I decided to do a giveaway. Martha only went and won it. She won a 9 by 12 inch piece, and she chose River to be the star of the show. Today I'm going to show you the process of me drawing River using a beautiful reference photo that was taken at CRUFT'S this year. So let's get into the video.
Okay, so for this piece I'm going to be using Strathmore's mixed media paper. This paper is 300 GSM, it's perfect for colour pencils. It really allows you to layer up those colours without damaging the integrity of the paper. I'm also going to be using frog tape. This is a painter's decorating masking tape, so it's really good, it masks really well, but it's also really delicate on the paper. Next, I'm going to be drawing my 3x3 grid. Do this just by splitting up the measurements of the paper, dividing them into 3. It's really easy to do, it just helps your brain break it down a little bit easier for the sketching process. So with the sketching process, I'm just using a HB pencil. This is a Dorler & Rowley one. I really like that they have the triangle kind of shaped pencils. I find they grip really nicely. I'm using my Tombow mono just to erase a few lines here, just editing the sketch because I just thought it looked a little bit too big, just adjusting little bits, little areas bit by bit to try and get a little bit more accuracy with the sketch. This is where I'm going to be drawing the poles. So River is currently jumping over a pole, as this is a picture of her at CRUFT'S in an agility competition. These are my Tombow monos. I love them. I have the chisel and I have the point one. They are amazing. They're so easy to use, they're so versatile, you can use them for so many different things, and they're just a lot more comfortable than holding a rubber. So this is my kneadable eraser. So I like to freshen up the eraser before I start to erase a bit of the outline. So here I'm not rubbing, I'm just dabbing, just to basically take off the top layer of the pencil before we start soft pastels. So the soft pastels that we're going to be using today, I always use them. They're just the Shaw and Marsh soft pastel. I have the 36 pack. You can buy these in Hobbycraft. I also use the pastel brushes. This one's from Soft. A lot of people ask me, why don't you use pan pastels? I love pan pastels, but they're so expensive. I'm using the Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils for this piece, but I'm also using a little bit of the Ohuhu coloured pencils. They're absolutely brilliant. We're going to be starting off with the black. I always start with the eyes. I think starting with the eyes just brings the piece to life and makes it feel more personal for me. As I'm drawing, it just allows me to see into this dog's personality a lot more. So I like to sketch in the pupil with the black first, and then I kind of go around it. I add the catch lights, spaces for the catch lights. Dogs always have, well, any pet really, but mainly dogs always have thick black skin around their eyes. I call it their eyeliner. So here I'm just drawing that eyeliner whilst adding a little bit of more like fleshy tones. I love this pencil. This is the cinnamon pencil. And it just adds a little bit more of that fleshy tone around the eye. Nice and subtle without it being too bright pink. So I'm using a mixed array of cold grey pencils for this piece. I go right down from cold grey 1 all the way up to cold grey 6, I believe, for the whole of this piece. I don't usually like to add white straight away, I like to add it at the end, but because this piece was so bright, the reference was so bright, River is a white toy poodle. There is a lot of true white on her, so I did use a lot of white to begin with as well. You want to always make sure that you are following the grain of the fur, even if you can't see the grain. Whenever you put your pencil down on that paper, always follow the grain. It really helps with the texture, especially later on. So here I'm just building up a little bit of that shade, a little bit of tone, but as well texture with the direction that I am using the pencil. I like to add the little wispies on the end. I call these wispies, they're like the little bits of fur that you can see at the side of the face. You can see them all over River, bless her, because she is a toy poodle. She's got all those curls. And then up to the eyebrows and back around the eye. You want to really make sure that the eyes are perfect. If the eyes aren't perfect, then it will make or break the piece. The eyes are they're so important, and that's not just the eye itself, it's just around the eye, because you want the main focus of everybody that's looking at this piece, you want their focus to go directly to the eyes. The eyes is where everything happens, is where everything is, the personality of the dog. And like I said before, it just brings them alive. It makes them not just a picture, it's showing, you know, there's a personality behind this picture, and that always comes through with the eye. Again, I really want to use this cinnamon colour. Again, it's just a Faber-Castell polychromos. A really good tool for showing skin tones when you don't want it to be so bright. Here I'm just erasing the sketch line with my Tombow Mono, purely because we're going to be putting white there, and white tends to interact with the pencil. You'll see the pencil through it. I'm also adding ice blue underneath the white. If you want your white pencil to really pop and really stand out in certain areas, all you need to do is add a bit of ice blue underneath it, and it will really make it stand out. You find that a lot of white tones aren't actually white. They usually have a lot of either blues, yellows, greens on there, because white will absorb and reflect the light a lot more than other colours. And think about all the colours that are going to reflect off light that we see in our environment. You've got the sunlight, which is more yellow. You've got the sky, which creates this blue tone. In River's case, she's on grass, so there's going to be a lot of green reflecting on her fur. You've got to think about all these different colours that are going to show through in the white fur. It's so important to understand that white fur isn't always just white. There is so much more colours there. We're adding a little bit of grain through with a mid-tone brown here, and then I'm just going over and blending it with the white pencil again, just so it doesn't look too solid. We want it to look softer. The pencil that I'm using here is walnut brown. This is for the shadows in the ear. So when you're drawing a really textured fur, so in River's case, she is a toy poodle, she's got a lot of curls, she's got a lot of layers of fur, and there's going to be a lot of shadow and a lot of depth into that fur. So you want to basically look at the shapes that you see, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later when we get on to drawing the fur on her body. But I was basically just looking at the shapes I could see in the shadows of that ear and drawing those in first. Then we would fill in the in-betweens, if you like. So that's what I'm doing now with the ivory colour pencils. This is off-white, a little bit of that cinnamon again, starting to build up the shape of the ear. Then we're going back in with a little bit more detail, and this is where layers are so important. You want to build up those layers. So we've put those basic shapes down, that's like your first layer. The next layer is this is the detail. We want to add a little bit more detail. We want to blend a little bit more here. And this just starts to build up this ear, and slowly it starts to look more realistic. As long as you've got those values down straight from the very beginning, from that first layer, pieces will start to look realistic. It's not always about necessarily the details. This is what I try to say to people. It's really about those values. Now we're doing the nose. I absolutely love drawing the nose. I love it so much. So I always start off with drawing the nostrils. Those are the darkest part of the nose. The nostrils are always just pitch black. So we're going to draw those in first, and we're going to do some detail around them. We've got the center line in the middle, and then there's a little bit of shade at the bottom of the nose as well. So we want to make sure we've got that there. Nostrils always have this nice little highlight underneath, which is why I've popped in here. And then we're going to add a little bit of purple, a little bit of a violet colour. The pencil I'm using here is actually called Caput Morton Violet. It's one of Faber-Castell's brown, deep toned brown, on the warmer side kind of brown colours, but it's got a beautiful violet undertone. It's so useful for dog pieces. So there you could also see I used a little bit of a green pencil. That was to just neutralise the warmer browns that I put down. I didn't want the piece under the nose on the muzzle to look so warm. I wanted it to be a little bit more neutralised, and you can easily do that by using your simple colour wheel, Colour Theory. Obviously it looked a little bit red, a little bit warmer, so we added a little bit of green to basically just neutralise the colour a little bit. Now we're going on to the second eye. This eye was a lot brighter. Obviously this was a little bit more, you could see this eye a lot more. So there was a big catch light all going around the edge of this eye. But you also want to make sure you blend it in certain places, because sometimes catch lights, you have more of a reflection, and then sometimes you have a catch light, which is like a bright white spot. In this case they were more like reflections, so they were a little bit softer. Again, we put in the eyeliner on. I went around the edge of the eye just to bring in that skin tone again, make it look more natural. And then we're adding a little bit more blue toned white up the top. We want this to look really bright compared to the rest of the face. Gently building up those layers of detail with the mid-tone greys and the darker greys, really threading them through the white with a sharp pencil, and then blending over the top with your white again really makes a nice soft detail that looks really realistic. We're now going to go onto the ear, and then we're going to work our way down the face. Again, doing the exact same process. Obviously you can see a lot more of this ear, and there's actually a lot more light on this ear as well. So we're doing the exact same thing. We're just going to block in the shapes of the shade that we can see. Then we're going to infill those colours in between. Obviously I can see a lot of that skin tone colour. We can see a lot more white. We can see a lot more off-whites as well. Usually with pieces, I don't always necessarily like to add white straight away. I will use off-white, and then at the very end I will add white over the top. I think that looks really nice sometimes. It really makes the white stand out a lot more at the end. What I like to do sometimes is I jump around the piece a little bit. Sometimes if I feel like I'm getting a little bit tired of one part of the piece, I don't feel like it's going the way I want it to go, I just need a bit of a rest from it, I'll move to a different part of the piece to just have a bit of a break from it. And that's really helpful for if you're getting a bit of art block. I know some people also like to switch between art pieces, which is what I also do sometimes. So down to the mouth now, I'm just putting in the white first for the teeth. White pencil, oil-based pencil, if you put that down first, it actually masks itself, so you can go over the top of it and it will not ruin the integrity of that white you've put down. So I always put that down first in places I really want the white to show through, in this case the teeth. We're using that kaput mortem again, blending a bit of browns in there, neutralising it a little bit to create that natural shadow. If you want to create a natural shadow, you really want to use your colour theory here. So in this case it was a little bit warmer, so we had a little bit of green to neutralise it, and you make a really nice natural shadow without just putting grey colour down or black. So like I said before, there is a lot of green reflections on River's fur. In this case, there's quite a bit under her chin because it's reflecting off that beautifully preened grass at CRUFT'S. It's also all under her body as well, as you can see here. I've already done the feet and the legs, and as you can see, I've definitely used the green again. So the green I'm using is actually from the Ohuhu coloured pencil set. It's called Sycamore. I use it a lot for green undertones, but in this case I really wanted to show the green reflections of that beautifully preen grass. So with the same technique that we used for the ear, I'm just blocking in the shadows that I can see with a dark and medium tone grey to create those beautiful poodle curls here. And then we're gradually building that up with the mid-tone greys, we're blending, and then we're adding a lot of highlights onto these curls, because you think of the height and you think of these curls as a 3D structure instead of a flat structure, right? You're going to have deeper tones in the shadow parts, they're going to be a lot of shading, there's going to be a lot of shading where it comes up into more of a mid-tone, and then it's going to be white on the top of certain parts. So that's really how you get it to look realistic. You want to think about them as a 3D object, not a flat object. But in this case, to break it down at the very beginning, we are going to be thinking of it as a flat object. We're going to be looking at the shapes that we can see to add in those shadows first, and then we're going to start moving on to thinking about them as a 3D object. Where can we put that light? Where can we put the deeper tones with a dark grey and even a black in some cases? Where can we put those coloured tones as well? So here I've also put a little bit of blue, there's a little bit of light grey there, and obviously the green. There's also some yellow in parts, like a buttercup yellow. I believe the yellow that I used for this piece is actually also from the Ohuhu set, called Desert Yellow. It's like I said, a buttercup yellow. It's great for the undertones of pieces. You also have a little bit of the cinnamon tone, just to add a little bit of warmth, but not too much. And it can also come through from the skin as well, especially on white dogs. You often see a lot of like a cinnamon colour, a brown colour that comes through the fur. So here I'm adding the black. I don't really like to add a lot of black, but in some parts you want to add the black to show where the shade truly is, because then it will give, again, it will give the piece more of a 3D structure, right? You want to show this part is darker because their legs in the way. So in this case, it's just gone underneath the belly between their arm and their leg, so there's going to be a lot of darker area there. Moving on to the tail, we want this to be really fluffy. The tail's not that curly, if I'm honest, it was a lot more fluffier. Doing the same kind of principle, I added in the block shadows first, gently pushing that detail through with a bit of a grain, with a sharper dark pencil, and then adding a bit of the light with the white pencil, adding a bit of coloured tones in there, there's a little bit of blue, by making sure that I'm adding the white first, just purely because it does mask. And it's nice if you want that white to look really bright, if you put that down first, that's usually a really good tip. So in this case, the tail was catching a lot of the light because it was the highest point of the whole of all of River, you know, it was up in the air, so she was getting all the light. So I wanted to make sure that the tail was really bright white. There is obviously a few undertones in there, and you often get that with brighter white fur. The more light that is on white fur, the more colour you're going to get coming through it. So we're starting to move on to kind of like the stump of the tail, where the tail starts to attach to the body, and it's starting to get a little bit more wispy. We're starting to go into that curly hair territory. So again, we're doing the same process, adding those details in. They're just a lot smaller this time, a lot more spiky, a little bit more smaller. but we want to make sure that that white on the top of River all the way up over her spine into her tail continues all the way through. So that's what I've added there, with a little bit of an ice blue undertone to really make it pop. Down onto the legs, we're doing the exact same thing, only I'm starting off not too dark. So there's certain parts of River's fur that in the curls weren't as dark as other places, and that's something else you really want to do. You want to make sure you're still looking at the kind of the tone of the shade you're seeing. It's not all going to be really dark. Again, thinking about that 3D structure underneath, you're going to have a lot more darker tones, and as it gets to the top and maybe on the outsides, they're not going to be as dark. So in this case, I am just using a mid-tone pencil instead of the darker grey, basically to just add those shapes in again for the shade, and going on over again with the white pencil to bring out the light. We're blending with a more lighter grey. That's another really good thing to do. You kind of want to make sure that when you're shading and adding these tones and these layers, you want to have a bit of a buffer pencil. In this case, for me, it was my light grey. So I was using light grey on areas that I didn't want to be bright white, but I wanted them to be blended and nice and soft. So I would use this light grey. I believe it's called Cold Grey 1 from Pastels Polychroma set, and it's a really good buffer for pieces like this when you're doing textures like this as well. So again, on the fur, you can see I've added on the feet here a lot of the darker tone on the bottom of the foot, and there's also a little bit of the foot, her other foot behind this one, so I've added the darker tone there to kind of show that. Just finishing off this leg, and as you can see, like, I've not added a lot of dark tone here yet, apart from this part, which is obviously underneath the leg, where you're going to get a lot of dark shadow. Keeping it nice and blended still like this, because underneath the leg, that's where the fur texture kind of changes. It's not as curly anymore, it's nice and soft, so we want to make sure that that's nice and sleek. So, are we ready to see the finished piece? Here it is.
If you wish to order your own commission just like this one you've seen today, all you need to do is visit my website down below, bethanyrachelart.com, to order your commission today. And while we're here, please make sure you give this video a thumbs up, please make sure you're subscribing if you're not already, and click that notification bell so that you get notified for my future videos. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!